Now I'm going to get on to my favorite subject, the white helmets. First of all, I'm going to look at what their propaganda says about them. They're bakers, they're tailors, they're engineers, they're pharmacists, they're painters, they're carpenters, they're students, they're ordinary people. And they exist only for humanity, solidarity, and impartiality. This is all taken from their website. I'm not making any of this up. When I want to save someone's life, I don't care if he's an enemy or a friend. What concerns me is the soul that might die. They're invested in life. Are you noticing the ESP, the images? Give to Syria's heroes who give hope to life. I don't know who's writing all this. The white helmets mostly deal with the aftermath of government air attacks, yet they have risked sniper fire to rescue bodies of government soldiers to give them proper burial. They're unarmed and neutral. They're from the people, for the people. They employ women, so there's no gender differentiation in the white helmets. They even employ children with Halloween posters. I never quite got that one, but and the fluff factor, kittens, cats. You will see them photographed everywhere, feeding the cats, saving the cats, holding the cats. They're under attack for saving lives. Are they affiliated with any side in the Syrian conflict? Taken directly from their website. We're not tied to any political group in Syria or anywhere else. We criticize anyone violating human rights, no matter what side they're on. How are they funded? This is important. The Syria campaign is fiercely independent. The Syria campaign has produced the white helmets and accepts no money from governments, corporations, or anyone directly involved in the Syrian conflict. And they're nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. I actually showed this presentation to a friend of mine that knew nothing about the white helmets, and after that little section, she went, well, I'd give them the Nobel Peace Prize after that lot. They're a very British affair. US aid has given $23 million to the white helmets. Our own UK Foreign Office has given £19 million, admitted in the Daily Telegraph after one of our articles was published. They also mitigated a few of our other claims, so I think that was sort of damage limitation. So they're government funded. They're US and UK government funded, who have a vested interest in the conflict in Syria. They were set up by humanitarian James Bond, James Le Mesurier. James Le Mesurier has a very interesting background. British military, mercenary now, one of the most highly commended officers in Sandhurst. He had a very interesting career, having left the British Army in 2000. He then worked with the UN at virtually all of their intervention nations. So Kosovo, Iraq, Afghanistan, Palestine, the list goes on. In 2014, he also set up a splinter group from the White Helmets, Mayday Rescue, which is also UK government funded. James Le Mesurier also worked up until 2008 for a group called Olive Group. Olive Group in 2015 merged with a group called Constellus. Constellus have in their portfolio a company called Academy, which is Blackwater. So you might recognize who that is. Basically, Olive Group, during the Iraq War, the second one, they were awarded a multi-million contract in conjunction with Bechtel in Iraq by US aid. But the merger also into Constellas and into Academy that is Blackwater, Bush was responsible for creating the situation where the CIA could outsource their assassinations to Blackwater. But it didn't stop with Bush. Obama gave $250 million to Blackwater to continue unspecified services to the CIA. So to continue carrying out assassinations without any accountability for the American government. So that goes straight back to the CIA. In 2008, James Le Mesurier joined Good Harbor. Both these companies are based in Dubai. He joined Good Harbor. Good Harbor, the CEO of Good Harbor is a guy called Richard A. Clarke. He was the terror advisor for Bush. He was purported to be a whistleblower, but now the consensus will say that basically he was a gatekeeper. He prevented Rumsfeld and Bush being prosecuted for their part in 9/11. He basically gave credence to the bin Laden story and the fact, and gave credence to the fact that Al-Qaeda is an organic entity. It's not being created by the United States government. But what's even sort of maybe more interesting is Clarke's connections to Rita Katz, a US-Israeli operative who runs Site Intelligence. Site has been responsible for propagating all of the ISIS and Al-Qaeda execution videos. So we go back to Homeland Security and to Israeli intelligence. Then if we go from Mayday Rescue to one of their leaders, Farouk al-Habib, who's a member of the Syrian National Opposition, Syrian National Council, which also has deep state connections back to the CIA. Raid Saleh, one of the leaders of the White Helmets, you might have heard about him, which is why the White Helmet's particularly poignant. You might have heard about him in the last 2 weeks. He was due to go to the States to be given an award by Relief International and Interaction, both of which are USAID Soros-backed NGOs. He was deported from Dulles Airport in the States. For a long time, no reason was given for this, until finally the Department of State, a spokesperson, Mark Toner, was put on the spot by Matt Lee of Associated Press. And he finally admitted that the reason that Raid Saleh had been spun was because of his extremist connections. Even though he was questioned and he was asked, he said, well, hang on, you've just deported somebody because they have extremist connections and they are the leader of this group. How come the group is not being associated with those extremist connections? Bear in mind, Bush destroyed 2 countries on the basis of their connections to Al-Qaeda. We also have to consider one of the other seed funders of the Syria campaign in particular is a guy called Ayman Asfari, billionaire CEO of petrol company that maybe you know, Ian, Petrofac. He has vested interests in Syria with both Shell and BP. So we're back to oil. If we look at this, the Syrian government, the current Syrian government, supports the Iran-Iraq pipeline, which is Russian-backed also. The US is in favor of the Qatar-Turkey pipeline. It's also worth noticing where that pipeline cuts through. It's Aleppo. So it gives an indication of why Aleppo is so important to them right now. I think it's Kennedy's nephew that also broke the news a couple of days ago that basically the war in Syria is to secure this pipeline and to prevent Russian influence on the oil revenue in Syria. Okay, now let's get to the White Helmets themselves. Again, They're embedded entirely in al-Nusra, which is al-Qaeda, and ISIS areas. So they do not operate in Syrian or government-held areas in Syria where the majority of the internally displaced people take refuge. So when they say they are for the people, I have to say that the majority of Syrians don't even know who they are. In the background, you'll see al-Nusra flags, and almost every video that you see of the white helmets, you will see the flags in the background. Remember, the white helmets mostly deal with the aftermath of government air attacks, yet they've risked sniper fire to rescue bodies of government soldiers to give them a proper burial. Well, these are government soldiers. And they've been massacred, they've had their boots removed, they've been thrown on the back of a truck. And they then flick the victory V. But they're impartial. When I want to save someone's life, I don't care if he's an enemy or a friend. What concerns me is that the soul might die. This is the difference between picking up bodies of their own operatives and picking up the bodies of the Syrian Arab Army, the Syrian National Army.
حتى نخرجهم إلى أهلهم نوثق بعض الجثث بحوزتهم هوية أو إثبات أو كذا لهم ونحن الآن شبيحة يبقوا إلى آخر من يحمل.
And here, these impartial saviors of humanity, they are holding up banners calling for the burning and the destruction of two Ara al-Sham al-Qaeda besieged villages, Kafraya and Fua. You might have seen some of my articles on them. These villages have been under siege for 5 years, since 2011, partial siege, and since March 2015, full siege. They've lost over 1,700 civilians to shelling and to sniping. They're calling for the burning. They're unarmed and neutral, apart from this white helmet that stood on an al-Qaeda tank carrying a submachine gun. I'll skip the video just to... Remember this one. We criticize anyone violating human rights, no matter what side they're on. This is a white helmet operative, Muaya Aga Hassan. You can find him on Twitter and you can find him on Facebook. Here he is last week, taking a selfie with 2 Syrian Arab army soldiers who were tortured publicly and executed publicly with white helmets in attendance. I'm not going to even attempt to show you the video because, one, it's so distressing for the family. They actually asked everyone to take the video down. But you can see from his Facebook page. So they are fiercely independent. They accept no money from governments, except for the fact that they are the British government's people in Syria, who've given them £19 million. If you look at any of their accounts on Twitter or Facebook, they follow almost predominantly ISIS or al-Qaeda, but they're funded $23 million by the United States government. You will only see them in terrorist-held areas, and yet Holland has just decided to give them €4 million. So the white helmets regularly fake evidence and recycle photographs. I haven't included them in here, but if you want to check them out, then talk to me afterwards. They are armed, not unarmed. They are sectarian, not impartial or neutral. They are embedded with ISIS and al-Nusra al-Qaeda. They are funded by US, UK, and EU governments. They're trained in Turkey, the biggest terrorist incubator in this conflict. They're funded by an oil baron and the Syrian opposition. And above all, they are executioners, not humanitarians. On behalf of the Syrian people who know that I'm here today to give this talk, the first responder term has been glorified by 9/11, and it's untouchable in PR terms. And what we're seeing now is an embedded shadow military force through which they can run supplies, weapons, fighters, gather intelligence, and even create medical triage for terrorist fighters, mercenaries, or soldiers, intent upon denying the Syrian people their right to decide their own future. If we lived in a just world, we would see Avaz and their ilk clamoring for an end to interventionism and demanding diplomatic solutions to support internal sovereign nation peace processes, as Russia is actually doing in Syria. However, we don't live in a world based upon a universal understanding of justice. We live in a world governed by the powerful and the greedy, devoid of compassion, intent only on their geopolitical prowess and humanity-exempt colonialism. For the sake of the Syrian people, we have to opt out of this matrix, this apparatus. If we do nothing else, we have to start questioning the overarching narrative that's being put out there by the mainstream media. And I know that all of you guys do that, but we need to encourage other people to do it as well. My opinion is not necessarily the truth, but it's an alternative. And that's what people have to be looking for, because these guys are dying as a result of the actions of these organizations and their creators and those that are benefiting from what they're doing. These people are dying trying to resist it. So the least that we can do is to make sure that whatever else we do, we opt out of this system and we try to help other people to do the same. It is possible to open source helping these people. It's really possible to do it. We have the media networks to do it now. We have social media. It's possible. We have to start finding different ways to help them. They deserve it. Because effectively, all they are asking for is the basic human right to determine their own future. And they deserve it.